So I'm going to welcome Tom Garruba here today. He's going to be speaking with us about managing third-party risk, vendor risk. And I'll just give you a short background here on Tom. So Tom is the Senior Director for the Shared Assessments Program and is an experienced professional in IT risk and information controls. Tom has extensive experience in developing, maintaining, and consulting on third-party risk programs. Tom is also a nationally recognized subject matter expert, so I'll bow to you on that, and lecturer and panelist on third-party risk. I know from talking to Tom this week that he is extremely passionate about risk management and helping us to understand the various issues and the insights that can be shared to better manage third-party risk. So I welcome Tom to tell us all about that.
Thank you, Nora. I really appreciate that. Since this kind of looks like church, I'm going to come down here a little bit. So let's start talking about some of the takeaways from this session. Here's what I want you to be able to walk away with. We're going to talk a little bit about the landscape. Why are we here? What's going on in the wonderful world of what we call third-party risk or vendor risk? We'll talk about that. Talk about the technology challenges and third parties and what they could possibly bring to your organization. First off, you're starting to see much more regulation on this. Okay? We have here, and we'll go over some guidance points later, you have the financial organizations being monitored by your regulators. In the States, I'm from the United States, as you might have figured that out. We have organizations such as the Office of Comptroller of Currency that has basically said, you need to treat third parties as if they're your own entities. And they're looking for this. And it's also going to be happening here in Canada. And it's already happening overseas. I was just in London last week, and I talked to a gentleman from the Financial Conduct Authority over there in the UK, and they're responsible for doing the same thing. They want to know how you're getting comfort over the security and privacy controls over your third-party vendors. The days of checklist auditing are gone. The days of checklists of you just looking at something going, okay, everything looks fine here, they're doing their stuff, file it away. They're gone. You have to do your due diligence. This also has to be in contracts. We'll talk a little bit about that. You need to be aware of the laws and the recommended guidances that are in place, and there's plenty out there, and I have some at the end of the slide deck for you to see. You also need to be aware of the technologies and security tools that your vendors are using. Are they in alignment with what your organization is using? Are they even better than what your organization has? This is called working and partnering with your third parties, with your vendors, with your key suppliers. You need to do your due diligence, and we talked about that. Once the horses are out of the barn, it's very difficult to get them back. So what do I mean by that? You should be doing your due diligence prior to entering into a contract or an agreement with a new third party. This is something in the States, the regulators are really hammering on banks, financial organizations, to sit there and say, why are you transacting data when you haven't even done your due diligence? What happens if there's a breach at that third party and you don't have a contract in place? Your organization has no legal recourse. And guess whose name goes on the cover of the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, etc.? It's your company. If you take a look at almost all of the third-party breaches that have happened at major organizations, the name of the third party is usually buried down in paragraph 4 or 5. And it's never in the headline. It's your organization because of the amount of records that you have, the amount of customers that you have. So you need to have an understanding of what's going on. You need to understand the scope of work. What are they doing for you? What are the data elements? Is it personally identifiable information? Is there cardholder data? On the healthcare side, is it health information? These data elements have different values, particularly on the dark net, in the black market. The average cost of personally identifiable information is no more than $5. Health information is upwards of $50, particularly in the States because they can use it more often, and it's much more difficult to get caught. So these are the realities when you're doing with your third parties. And how often should you reassess them? This is not a one-and-done activity. This is something you need to do constantly. You do it on changes of scope, if a new business unit is doing business with them, and changes of scope includes location, understanding where your data not is only housed, but where it is accessed. A lot of people have a tendency to think to themselves, well, it's housed here, that's where the scope of work is, I'm fine. I'm sure you're all familiar with a thing called follow the sun methodology, right? In terms of your support. Your customers might even have, customers meaning your corporate customers with your organizations, might even have what we call RDC, restricted data clients, which says embedded in their contract, nobody outside of Canada or the United States, or insert your country here, is to be exposed to our data. And if that's the case, you're in violation of the contract. And I can guarantee you in those contracts, when they have an RDC clause embedded in it, there's a cost associated with it. We'll charge you $10 a record. Oh, by the way, we're talking 10 million records. You can quickly do the math. So these are the realities with third-party risk. You need to understand what's being done by your individual business units with those vendors. Have an understanding of the operational risks tied into them, the processes, users, how they're assigned, the technology risks, geographical risks, concentration risk. Concentration risk is growing more and more under the microscope of your regulators. Case in point, last week I mentioned I was in the UK, and I was informed that last year, and this might have even affected some of you, there was major flooding in Chennai about a year or so ago. Now, what does that have to do with concentration risk? If your organization is using a provider, a service provider, that is doing your key processing in Chennai, think of what happens now when these individuals can't get to the office, can't get to the or they're obviously working on other things, staying above water, than to focus on the work that they're to be doing for you. Now take that concentration risk, take that incident right there and think about your organization. Now quadruple it or quintuple it. We're talking all 5 major banks in the UK suffered because of that flood in Chennai. They all happened to use the same providers, plural, that had their key operations in Chennai. It brought the banking industry to a standstill for almost 3 days in the UK. So this is something you need to think about too. We're using these vendors, they're best of breed. Are your vendors using them too? Talk to your service providers. They're probably not going to be very open in disclosing who their key customers are, but you could pretty much figure it out. And have an understanding is, okay, what do I need to do from a resiliency perspective to have my other operations spread out? We also have to deal with geopolitical risk now. It was a couple years ago, prior to me coming to Shared Assessments, I was with a large healthcare organization in Pittsburgh called CVS Health, Fortune 10 company. And I was getting ready to send a team over there to do an assessment on a vendor in Bangalore. One councilman in Bangalore called for a citywide transportation strike. One councilman. The city was shut down almost for an entire day, and then he backed off. We had one thing to sit there and have to postpone your assessment, but think about all the people that are supporting your applications in that one city. So you have to think about geopolitical risk as well. Business resiliency, huge topic today. This does not simply mean business continuity and disaster recovery. This is at the front end of business continuity and disaster recovery. Business continuity, how does your business continue on in the event? There's a tornado, there's a hurricane, there's a flood, etc. Disaster recovery is more on the technical side. Oh my God, somebody spilled coffee on a server. How do we recover this thing? Can we get it up and running within the next 3 to 4 hours? Business resiliency is what do you have in place to prevent you from having to enact your business continuity plan or your disaster recovery plan. And guess what? Cyber resiliency is part of that now. How are your third parties cyber resilient? What do they have in place? Do they have updated patches on their network, on their firewalls, on their routers? Look what happened in Bangladesh. You can just go through and see all of the findings that were with that bank during the whole SWIFT encounter a couple, month or so ago. There's a litany of items. Running old systems, running systems that are no longer supported. All of that ties into your cyber resiliency. What about cyber insurance? You should be asking this. This is growing and growing and growing. This should be in your contracts with your key service providers. What do you have with respect to cyber insurance? This is where you need to work with your legal departments, with your contracts or procurement organizations, and determine what is, based on the scope of work, based on the amount of records, based on the data. In the event there is a breach or other type of event, we will be able to be covered. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to raise your hand. There's also inherent risks with your vendors. Could be technological, could be locational. You need to be able to identify those and have your own risk tolerance. For those of you that do risk management, or for those of you that do third-party assessments, you do not own the risk. The business unit owns the risk. And I've often instructed over the years with a lot of organizations that don't look at yourself as a cost center. Because I've had so many people, how do I get more money? How do I get more people? We're a cost center. Justify it in this manner. You're a value center. The value you bring to your organization is you have the ability to perform this analysis. You have the tools at your disposal, whether it's security background, whether it's an audit background, whether it's a privacy background. You have an understanding of risk. And you're able to bring that to the business unit and go, you know what? You might want to back off of this a little bit. We might have to look at another vendor because this assessment doesn't look good. And we're worrying a little bit. As we go on, you need to mitigate these risks. I'm not saying you need to stop and say, no, sorry guys, can't do business with you. My job when I ran the CVS program was not to be Dr. No, but I played the card 26 times before I left there. 26 times I've turned down third parties, suppliers, vendors. Just said, your security and privacy controls are akin to Swiss cheese. We're not going to do business with you. It's too risky. We don't want our name on the cover of the financial journals and the major papers. But you are going to run into situations where you might have a single source provider or sole source provider, and we're going to talk about those as well. And the business unit will come to you and sit there and say, you know what? We need to do business with them. Here's why. What can we do to still bring them in? That's when you take your assessment hat off and put on your consultant hat. Let's get you guys up to our standards. Here's what we require you to have. That's a win-win. That's a win for your program. That's a win for the business unit. That's a win for the corporation. It's a win for the vendor. So that's how you need to start taking a look at that and insist in helping them mitigate those risks. Let's talk about some unintended data transfers. Accidental internal access to data, probably still one of the biggest things out there. What is a breach? Everybody thinks a breach is an external hack. It's not. A breach is unintended access to data, whether it's internal or external. We always hear about the external. Somebody hacked here, somebody hacked there. What about the internal breaches? What about the individual in your organization or in your supplier or your vendor that once had access to key transactions, transferred to another department, and they never pulled the transactions off of her user ID string or her access list? What do? Guess what? Now they can go in and see that file. Think about the people, think about the companies at your vendors, let alone your own organizations, that are exposed to your data. And I'm not just talking electronic, I'm even talking paper-based. I wonder how many people in this room know if your custodial staff is assessed. Think of what they have exposure to. Your garbage cans, your desks, all the passwords written on your Post-it notes on the side of your cubes and offices. Think of what they're exposed to. What about the people that service your machines, your copiers, your printers? Everything's electronic now. I can guarantee you there's a cache file, and that file has all kinds of confidential data in there. Sensitive PII, process information, transaction information, and here comes the Xerox man or the Ricoh man or somebody like that to fix the to come in and fix it. What are you doing from an HR perspective? Are you sure that these folks have had background checks? Are you comfortable with what they have with respect to a background and somebody has performed that due diligence on that vendor, on that supplier? This is the thinking that I want to try to get you into. And it's not just all a check sheet, file it away. You have to ask. You have to inquire. You get 100% of what you don't ask for. So start asking your suppliers. Start asking your vendors. Do you have this? Oh, by the way, I want to see evidence of it. And just having somebody going, we have a policy, is not good enough. Everybody knows that you bypass policies. It's not good enough to have a policy. It's good enough to be able to show evidence that people are following the policy. So you need to dive a little bit into that. We talked a little bit about follow the sun methodologies earlier. This is key. You might even have to have an understanding and work with your legal departments. This is building relationships within your organization. So you can reach out to them and say, I got a contract here that says this. Are we permitted to do this? Case in point, somebody, when I was in the States, somebody said, I have a contract here that says the data is being housed in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and there's a data center in Puerto Rico. Are we okay with that? And I said, contract says the United States. There's nothing in here about territories. There's different laws that apply to certain items. Territories, at least in the United States law, are under different codes and operate differently than under state law. It might be the same here in Canada. But again, this is how I want you to think. Read the contract. It's fascinating what you're going to get out of those contracts. We talked a little bit about cyber insurance. Here's where you need to do something special. What is a record? I can ask 10 people what a record is and I'll get 10 different answers. There is no definition of a record. I talked to a gentleman at a law firm that focuses on cyber insurance, and I said, what's your definition of a record? He said, there is none. It's whatever you put in a contract. So whether you put Tom Garruba, 1234 Main Street, Calgary, maybe that's one record. Tom, one record. Garruba, a record. Calgary, a record. You need to have that defined in the contract. Because when it comes time to have an understanding of the dollar value associated with a breach and associated with the exposure that you're presenting, you need to be able to quantify that. So remember this, there is no definition of a record. So if you happen to start reaching out to third parties and you ask, what's the definition of a record? And you go, 10 million records. Based on what? What am I sending you? Take a look at the data elements. What constitutes a record? Very key. The big one, fourth parties. How low do you go? Here's the struggle with fourth parties. Unless you have a direct relationship with them, there's nothing you can do. A gentleman, when I was in the UK, said this wonderfully. He said, assessing a fourth party is nothing more than a political activity. It's a political exercise. To sit there and say, yep, we did it. Unless you have a direct relationship with that fourth party, they owe you nothing. But you should be asking your third parties, who outside of you is exposed to my data? Who are you doing business with that's going to be in contact with my data, electronically or physically, such as shredding or storing paper documentation? Who else is going to be exposed to my data? And by the way, you should also have that defined in the contract. I can guarantee you, talking to people and in my own experiences, there are people that sit there and go, wait a minute, you're using them? Didn't they just have a breach, two breaches last year? I don't want you using them. But wait a minute, does this even affect me? Was my data involved in this breach that happened? I didn't know we were using them or you were using them. That should also be defined in the contract. And you as a company, you as a business unit, as part of risk management, should have that understanding as well. You can always go back to the vendor and say, I don't approve of this one. I need you to pick another vendor. I've done it. Like I said, you get 100% of what you don't ask for. So with respect to fourth parties, it's a challenge to handle them, but you owe it to yourself to find out who those fourth parties are. I wanted to provide you some great guidance points here that you can look at, you can read up on to get an understanding of what's going on in the realm of third-party risk. Here's some great points here. Annex F, obviously from the Bank of International Settlements, goes into some detail on how to assess your on outsourced providers, etc. The Office of the Superintendent of Financial Services here, Guideline B10. We have that. I mentioned a couple in the United States with respect to OCC 2013-29 and Appendix J. Appendix J focuses a lot on the cyber resiliency and business resiliency. And lastly, the Shared Assessments Program. We have been setting the standard on third-party risk and third-party assessments for over 11 years. And that's what we concentrate on. And we have tools, questionnaires, audit steps to perform and execute, as well as being able to assess your own program or to have somebody else even assess their program through what's called the Vendor Risk Management Maturity Model. And of course, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can see me on LinkedIn. I'll give you a card. I also blog in the, for the Huffington Post in the business section on operational risk. And shameless plug for a book that's coming out. I've actually authored a chapter on third-party risk for the Risk book series based out of the UK, and the book's going to be called Cyber Risk. And I've been asked, and I have just completed writing the chapter on third-party risk. So a lot of this is coming out, and you're not in this alone. So if somebody comes up to you and says, where do we go, what do we do? There's a ton of information out there, and obviously reach out and you can collaborate with others as well. So I want to thank you for your time. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have or Nora, any questions you might have.
Yeah, for sure. Let's open this up then, and questions that you may have, please raise them. And, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. What if we have two third parties that we want to work together to provide services to us? So do we have a contract with both of those parties, separate contracts, but we rely on them to work together to get services?
That's a good one. What happens if you have two organizations that are providing you a service and you require them to work together? That has to be in the contract. It starts in the contract. Nobody's going to do nothing if it's not in the contract. I had a guy that once told me, goes, I can get a vendor to wash my car if I get it in the contract. So think of that. Organizations are not going to play nice. You could tell them, I need you two to work together, but it needs to be part of the statement of work. It needs to be part of the agreement. Because they're going to be sharing information. Even though it's your information, they're going to be sharing it amongst themselves. They're going to have the non-disclosure agreements, things of that nature that they're going to have to embed into that process. And you have to be the driver of that. Have them all in the same room together and say, this is the way we're going to do business. There's enough work here for everybody's beak to get wet. But in order for us as an organization to achieve our goal and our objective for this project, I need you two to work together because you're both servicing us. So get that in a contract, have that defined, and it's probably going to be part of your master services agreement or an addendum to your agreement. And here's something else I want to throw out at you as well, and I didn't mention this earlier. I think it was in a previous slide. It's a great idea for you to get, if you don't have this as part of your contracts now, as an addendum. It's called either a DSA for a data security addendum to the master services agreement, or something called a DPSR, which stands for Data Privacy and Security Requirements. I've seen them in two different piles of that nature. So if you have a third party that is doing certain things with respect to customer information, you might require them to have the additional controls based on privacy. And I would highly recommend you work with your legal counsel on that. That's something you don't want to take on by yourself. Yes?
I think it's very common for third-party service providers to use fourth parties.
Mm-hmm.
How much diligence do you do on those fourth parties?
Great question. How much diligence do you do on your fourth parties? If you have a direct relationship with them, you can go as much as you want on those individual parties. I know a bank back in the States that goes 6 levels deep. They will assess down to the sixth party. The problem is the time constraints. And I go by the 80-20 rule. What are you getting out of getting to the 5th party and 6th party? You know, there's a point of diminishing returns. It really is dependent on your risk appetite. So what I've also I've seen and what I've instructed and advised organizations to do is take a look at your risk appetite. And you need to sit back and say, is this something we need to do? This financial organization said we need to take it to this level because they also do a lot of big government work. So whether or not the government forced their hand on this, I don't know. But I do know they take it to the 6th level. Most stop at the 4th.
Even on that fourth party, if you don't have a relationship, how do you do diligence?
Great point. If you don't have a relationship with the 4th party, how do you get your due diligence? There's a technical term called CYA. We all know what that is. Okay, so how do you do that? I reached out to a third party and I asked them, what did you do to get your level of comfort over this 4th party? And I've done this more than once. And they said to me, well, we either went on site, we did this, we got this report, whether it's a SOC 2 report or we sent somebody from the Big Four to go and we got a report, blah, blah, blah. I said, great. Any documentation you have, can I see that? And as a third party, I should be able to be exposed to that because that's covered under your typical NDA, non-disclosure agreement. But if not, and this is where you got to make sure you're talking to the right people at the third party. I want something coming from an executive level, COO, CISO, CIO, somebody that has accountability to tell me that you have done, meaning you the third party, executed due diligence to have a good understanding as to the security and privacy controls of that 4th party and get it in writing. Because when I hear this, hi, I'm from audit and I'm here to help, or I have a regulator doing that, I'm able to show them, I couldn't go and assess my 4th party, but I got this from the CIO that says, we went on site, we did this, and we're happy with that. Then even from a legal perspective, I'm safe. My company is safe. So always try to get something back from your third party saying, tell me, how did you get that level of comfort over this vendor? And hopefully they didn't just go, well, they were the lowest cost. And if you get that, then you might want to rethink your strategy. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Good advice. Yeah. Other questions about that? I have one for you, Tom.
Sure, Nora.
You
Thank
talked about the importance of doing the risk assessments up front, which I think we are well aware of that need, and of course the reassessments on a regular basis. I guess one question that's come up for me with some earlier meetings this week is what type of risk assessment is useful in what types of situations? I'm thinking in particular, we had debates whether you do have the vendor do a self-assessment of the resilience and security, or whether you should bring in an independent third party to do that assessment, and I'm sure there's a whole range of things, you know, externally assisted, all kinds of things. What's your experience? When is one more valuable for another or than another for a situation?
Great question. And I'm going to use that typical legal jargon that says it depends. And the reason why I say it depends is, again, it comes back to your risk appetite. The first thing you should do is identify who your critical providers are. Take a look at your vendor inventory. This doesn't mean just reach out to procurement. If you can, try to get a file from accounts payable or whoever it is, the checker, and say, can I have a listing of everybody that was paid out last year? And then break it down by vendor, break it down by business unit. So now you're able to get a better picture as to the services being done for the business units. And you can go back to the business units and go, tell me what IBM is doing for you. What's IBM doing for you and you? Now, hopefully, all of that is encompassed in a master services agreement with IBM. But if not, these individual organizations have their own individual contracts. You're going to need to be able to consolidate those and take a look at those and see, okay, they're doing work in India, they're doing work here, they're doing work there. Now, how should we approach this? And that's where I say it comes back to your risk appetite. What I would recommend, you at least once do a good, solid, thorough assessment. Now, at Shared Assessments, we utilize the Trust But Verify model. What does that mean? You start with a questionnaire. And the SIG questionnaire that we have developed, and it's part of the knowledge, is 1,500 questions. I know people are going, what? But it doesn't mean you need to answer every single question. It's just there for you to get a gauge on. These are some questions you could ask with respect to risk management, access control, mobile computing, cloud computing, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. Figure out which questions you need to ask, have them complete that and send it back to you. But as I mentioned, you also want them to provide you documentation. I also recommend you going on site, at least to your key providers, to see what they're doing. That should be done, in my opinion, at least once every 2 to 3 years. Now, there's no particular guidance on that says, because I get that a lot. Well, you know, the regulators are telling me, no regulator is going to tell you you need to do this. Their job is to sit there and say, you might want to look into this a little bit deeper, or what level of comfort are you getting over these providers? But you should be going to take a look. And how many of you have actually went and visited your third parties before? Oh, more than I thought. Okay. And where do they usually take you? Do they take you where the processing is, or do they take you to the data center? Where do they usually take you? Just shoot it out. Pardon me?
Wherever we ask them to take.
Wherever you ask you to take you. I can tell you most of them will try to take you to the data center. Why do they want to take you to the data center?
Flashing lights are fun.
Flashing lights are fun. You know, look at this glowing object, because that's usually where the security is. But I can tell you from experience, I went once, and when I visited a third-party vendor, and if you've seen some of these, on the IT side of the house, it looks like a convention. You know, all of their customers, you know, they have them on the wall, they're all lined up, they tell you about how good we are, they have all of the marketing memos there, and I walked up and they said, well, this is all the work being done by CBS. I said, this is great. Why is my competitor right across from them? Utilizing the same printers, having access to each other in terms of functionality, in terms of they might be swapping projects or something like that. Should I be worried? You're darn right I should be. Am I going to get that out of a report or out of a questionnaire that they sent me? So it's beneficial for you. You owe it to yourself to go and at least visit them and see what they're doing from the process angle. See what they're doing for you. Make sure that you're comfortable with what they have, where the actual processing is being done. Same with call centers. Same with call centers. Things that you're going to see at the call center level, and not just data or not just electronic anymore. A lot of breaches are happening with pencil and paper. How far do you want to go down? So, again, I can't push this enough to say, please, at least with your critical ones, go and pay them a visit once every 2 to 3 years.
Great.
Any more questions?
Okay. Any questions in the audience at this point? So one last question.
Sure.
You've done a lot of work in doing shared assessments and workshops with financial industry. Do you see any particular risk or risk area that is being underestimated by the financial industry?
I would still have to say business resilience. This has become the hot topic right now. A lot of focus has been on, here's my controls, here's what I have my firewalls, I have the blinking lights, I have my project plan. But now you need to be able to show what your vendors are doing from a resilience perspective. You need to be able to test with them, and that's another thing that they're focusing on. It's one thing to sit there and say, hey, my third-party vendor just sent me their business continuity plan. This is what they're going to do. Great. Have you tested it with them? And it doesn't mean a call tree. You need to test with it. And the regulators are pushing this more and more and more. They want you to be a part of it because that's how you learn. I was once, back in my banking days, when I was in internal audit, I was on the dark side of the force once, and I was on a call, and there was a huge business continuity disaster recovery test off-site. And this was before we had GPS systems and all this stuff. We had to rely on Yahoo Maps and whatnot. And I'm on this call, and the project manager said, this went wrong, and this went wrong, and this went wrong, and this went wrong. 20, 30 minutes of this went wrong. And he finally said, anybody have any comments? You probably figured me out by now. I said, yeah, I do. Congratulations, you passed. What do you mean you passed? I said, you identified everything that went wrong. You fail when you don't fix the things that went wrong when you redo this test next year. That's when you fail. That's when you get written up. So there's a purpose to that. And this is what the regulators are going to want to start to see, particularly in financial services. The resilience that you don't have to enact those business continuity or those cyber resilient plans that you have. So work with your vendors. Make sure you're on the same page with them. Work with your business continuity and your cyber teams, your cyber response teams, and say, how often should we do this test? Once a year, twice a year? Maybe you want to do more from a cyber resilience perspective than you need to do from a business continuity or disaster recovery. Again, you're not in this alone. Work with your business units. Develop relationships with information security, with network security, with legal, with privacy, with procurement. You're all working on this together, and it's really going to make your risk tolerance, your risk programs much, much more stronger.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Just before I thank Tom formally, I do have a public service announcement, because once I start to thank Tom, you guys are gone. So we have about 10 minutes between closing out here and heading over to the ballroom, because the Deputy Governor Minister, say that again? Yeah, Deputy Governor is going to be over at the ballroom, and we have a lot of media coming in. So if we could make our way very quickly, as Amanda would say, scoosh, right, over to the ballroom, that would be great. And now, Tom, thank you so much for your excellent insights, for sharing the knowledge that you have, which is very vast. Thank you very much.
Everyone.